Let me set the stage of what the topic is about, and then we'll get started. Right? I will introduce the topic, and then we will introduce the esteemed guests. Okay. So first, today we talk about technology, and how that is revolutionizing the HR practice, right? Whether it is digitization and data analytics, or the future trends towards how we are shaping the workplace using technology, right? So the four pillars I would think about are around, balancing the tech advancements with the human-centric approach, number one. Number two would be adoption of digital platforms, whether it is, recruiting, onboarding, performance management, or employee engagement. And then third thing is using of data analytics and machine learning in these, information age, and helping decisive decisions made by the HR teams. And finally, the AI-driven HR assistants or virtual, areas of training which help the HR functions to really propel and strengthen, right? So with that, without further ado, let me introduce our first, panelist, Mr. Aditya Kohli. Aditya is the Chief Human Resource Officer at Orient Electric, a CK Birla group, and has over 2 decades of experience that spans across multiple facets of HR. He has worked in Singapore, India, London, and managed global teams in a highly matrix global environment. Prior to Orient, he has worked across sectors in marquee organizations like Clicks Capital, Airtel, Standard Chartered Bank, and Hewitt Associates. So please give a warm welcome to Aditya, please. Thank you, thank you. To my right is Atul Sahgal. He's the GVP of Talent Acquisition, Publicis Sapient. He has more than 20 years of extensive talent acquisition experience and manages a group of creative recruiters who solely strive towards successfully meeting organization hiring goals. Right? His core expertise includes designing and implementing the hiring strategies and continuous recruitment processes and improvements. So please give a warm welcome to Atul. Now that we have set the stage with the context of the topic and introductions are done, let's get into some, question and answer session. So I guess Atul is getting the first question, right? So Atul, as HR technology continues to evolve, right? How can organizations strike the right balance between leveraging tech-driven solutions for efficiency while maintaining the human-centric approach, right? And what would the employee experience and interactions look like?
Thanks, Kartik. So we are at a stage in this professional journey wherein technology is seeping into every aspects of the organization, and especially HR. Now, how does it help us? If you talk about automation or any other technical advances, right? It obviously helps in better decision making, improved efficiency, and at the same time, cost saving. What we have to look for is that obviously we need to identify the steps or the processes which are repetitive ones and see wherever automation can be incorporated. So that's the first and the foremost thing, right? 2, you have to look for the automation tools. But at the same time, when you're deciding on a tool, you need to ensure that the employee experience that is not suffered. And 3, which is the most important part, you need to ensure that the HR professionals, they're very well trained with the automation tools. But having said that, we also need to ensure, we need to take care of the common pitfalls, right? Overdoing in terms of automation, that is also not the right thing. That is there. At the same time, you need to take care of data privacy and safety aspects because you are collecting information of the employees. So that's another aspect to it. The third and the foremost thing is resistance to change. Whenever you bring in a technology or a new technology, you'll always see that resistance, and especially from the HR folks, right? Because they are non-techies. So they are always resisting to that change. So you need to ensure that when you're incorporating a new technology, that resistance doesn't come especially from the HR folks.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you so much, Atul. Aditya, would you like to add to that?
Okay, thanks, Atul. I think before we get into this, let's kind of get a little bit of context on HR technology, right? So if you really look back, and many years back, you started with people counting heads, which is where you get the word head count. Then you had automation in terms of punching in payroll, and you kind of went to a step further. Then you had ERP coming in and you started looking at optimizing of resources. Now, as you moved along, you reached a stage where functionality became very important. There was talent acquisition solution, there was learning solution. Functionality became important. Today we are at a stage where functionality is given. You moved to a stage where experience becomes core. But you know, as technology progresses, and we've done a long, big journey around that, but as technology has progressed, at the center of all of the technology, there's a constant. And what's that constant? That constant is us. We haven't evolved as fast as the technology has evolved, right? So when you're kind of looking at human-centric technology, the core of a human-centric technology is us. How do you enable us? How do you drive productivity? How do you kind of, become, I don't know, maybe a loudspeaker for a crowd where you need to speak. You don't need to speak harder, you need to speak into that microphone. How do you augment yourself to kind of get that benefit? And I think that is the shift that's happening. But the core in the center is, how does a person get motivated? How do you kind of connect? How do you kind of incentivize? How do you make sure that a person feels safe? How do you pamper his sense of curiosity? How do you make sure that on a every day-to-day basis that person is moving in the right track and getting better? These are some elements that continue to remain same regardless of the technology. So while I'm going to take a little bit of a contrarian view, technology can get better as long as the center of the technology is not deeply integrated, not deeply effective. Technology is useless. I remember seeing a cartoon many years back. How many of you remember most computers used to have a sticker which said Intel inside? Show of hands if anybody has seen. Okay, a lot of you. Now if you look at that sticker, the cartoon showed Intel inside, idiot outside. Right? I think for us, you got to be conscious that as new technology comes in, do we have the right elements to ingrain it with the people? Otherwise, it's just another new technology. Sorry.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. So that's about balancing technology and the human-centric approach, and very well thought out words. By the way, did I mention that both Atul and Aditya are Zaggle's customers? I just want to plug that in there, and for for Samit right there.
Sorry, did I also mention that I didn't know?
Awesome. So why don't we take the next step into the second question? I have is, could you elaborate on any specific examples where digitization has transformed your traditional HR practices, right? And how your organizations can ensure that these digital solutions enhance rather than detract from the employee experience?
I think this is a good question, right? In HR, we do a lot of engagement studies. We kind of, there used to be a trend. You had many big companies who used to do once a year engagement study. At the end of a year, they used to do it in month 1. By month 4, you used to get results, and then you used to do something. And by the time you did anything, 30% of the population had left the organization. You had new sets of people. Now, today, the technology has moved to a point where instead of large aggregations, taking an average of what the engagement score for the organization is, you have many new tools available which are almost polling employees on a day-to-day basis. There's something, I saw the stand outside, there's a company called Infido which is doing engagement. I can see an employee on a day-to-day basis, how that person's engagement is. And Atul is super bright day 1, super bright week 2, super bright week 3. Something has dipped. Now, instead of every HR guy trying to figure out who is, who isn't engaged, I can focus my efforts and talk to Atul, on a one-on-one basis, in a confidence, with his confidence, and understand how I can address what has brought about that dip. Now, this is incredible power of digitization. I'm kind of reaching out and connecting him as an individual on a one-on-one basis. And I think that's the power of good technology.
Yep. Thanks, Aditya, for using me as an example. Uh, let's look at it. Until 2019 or 2020 rather, just before the COVID, many of the organizations were into pen and paper model, right? And all of a sudden, March 2020, we all realized, oh, we have to go paperless. And it happened. It happened everywhere, right? Majority of the organizations, right? Not just limiting to IT companies or ITES, but to the non-IT sectors as well. So I think which was a difficult task pre-COVID days, but right, it's a no-brainer nowadays. So that's what it is. Two is that if you look at it, and we have seen, like Aditya mentioned, there are so many beautiful organizations sitting outside, right? There's so many beautiful tools they have come up in terms of digitization and all those things. You look at it, today's generation, and in fact, if you look at the workforce, right, majority of them are millennials. They're so much used to their mobile phones and all those things. So hence, it's very important for organizations to have those mobile apps in place. Because I may not be using my laptop that often, but I'm using my mobile phone right the time I wake up till I go to sleep, right? So if those apps are available over there, for example, I won't name the organization, but one organization is, they have a mobile app in place wherein their consultants, how much time they are spending with their clients, essentially the billable hours, right? They track it that way. And they provide the data to the individuals for an individual to compare his or her performance with the peers. The organization doesn't use the data in terms of assessing the individual. So it is like, I know my data is being captured, but it is being used for my own benefit. And that's a beautiful thing. Daily I interact with my clients, spend those hours and come back, hey, how am I performing vis-a-vis to my peers, right? So that's what we need to look at it. In terms of training and learning, if you look at it, right? And over here, I'll quote an example. In fact, Walmart, you look at it. They use a virtual reality platform in terms of training their new hires. Real life scenarios, they expose them to it, and especially those Black Friday sale frenzies, right? How it turned out to be, how the customer reaction has been, how do you manage a crowd, conflict situation, and all those things. So a new hire gets exposed to those kind of scenarios through that virtual reality platform. So while that's a virtual reality, it's a reality for us. In fact, one of the large IT organization, if you look at it, the way they onboard an individual, it's a beautiful way. It's an experience center wherein they get all the new hires into that room and then they expose them about their organization. Now, day one, that employee is sold to the organization, just looking at the experience that an individual is getting. So there's loads and loads of technology around us. It's just that we need to identify the right set of tools, what really works in our ecosystem, and what is beneficial for our employees.
Fantastic. Thank you, Atul and Aditya. This really gives us context on, what tools can help streamline operations and enhance efficiencies across the board. So thank you for that. Let's move on to the next question. So looking ahead, right, future, what emerging trends in tech work or work tech do you foresee shaping the future of HR? And how can organizations prepare to adapt and capitalize on these trends to stay ahead of the evolving landscape? Go ahead, please.
So I think if I have to crystal ball gaze, at the speed at which you have now lots of devices, so this mobile phone captures so much information for you, could be hugely beneficial. I think the core function of HR is about how do you create a productive differential from other companies. Right? Now, so that's one major function, right? But on the other hand, at the heart of a company is our employees. How do you make sure that they are successful on a day-to-day basis? I think technology, and I'm a firm believer of that, technology has the power to revolutionize that. You know, I was giving this example in the morning where when you interview, and let's say you interview 10 people, chances are that it's a little bit of a struggle to kind of say out of the 10 people that you interviewed, who's really the best. You could have augmented technology today where you have a phone lying on the side and you're interviewing, going through the process. At the end of 10 interviews, you set parameters and through machine learning, through data that's been captured through the interviews, the system kind of says, you know, out of the role that you're looking at, these are the two people who really stand out. You know, that productivity differentiation could be huge. Maybe another example, and this is I'm quoting somebody else, where that person looked at ChatGPT as a tool. And we use ChatGPT to ask questions. But what that person did was he was meeting a Spanish-speaking university. So the university's curriculum or university's agenda was there. He takes that agenda, puts it in ChatGPT, says summarize it in 5 points in English. So that thing has translated in English and given 5 points. He puts his company's agenda and says now match, saying what are the things that I should be selling to this client. And all of this done in the reception of that company. And by the time he goes and meets the client, he's a lot more effective in selling the organization. And there are just so many numerous examples that can be used to drive productivity differently. Now, if you really don't know how to use the tools, you can have a Ferrari out there. But if you don't know how to drive, it's just a Ferrari, right? So I think that's where the skill aspect really kind of comes into play. How do we equip the organization? How do we equip the leaders who are oldies like me? Newer generations tend to be a lot more astute about it. How do we equip the organization to be skill ready, to be able to harness this differentiation? And reality is you will end up with organizations with almost two sets of people. Folks who know how to use the tools and folks who don't. And there will be a big differentiation in productivity between these two guys.
I would definitely add, please ignore the oldies comment from Aditya. I know he's young at heart, quite young at heart.
He's young at age as well, yeah?
Young at age as well.
I'm definitely not old.
What about you, Atul? What do you think?
Yeah, I think Aditya summed it really well. But just to add over there, you look at the employee life cycle, right? It starts from the hiring. And when it comes to hiring, we know there are too many automated tools which are available in the market. The organizations have been building their own in-house tools as well at the same time. But let's look at the other stages post that, right? Onboarding. Now that's the first experience, a physical experience mostly now that we are back to office and all those things an employee gets, right? What experience are we giving to an individual when it comes to the onboarding, right? Are we making an individual fill those mundane forms on and on, be it online or offline, whatever it is, right? So that's one area which I think the organizations are focusing on, because that's the day one for an employee inside the organizations once the hiring is done. So that's a very important aspect, because the way you feel in an organization on day one is something that's going to set the tone for the rest of your tenure with the organization. So that is there. The next steps, if you look at it, when the employee is serving the organization, right, the employee benefits or the employee experience during the tenure in the organization, how are you training an individual, right? So at every stage, there is technology involved now, and the organizations are leveraging it across sector. The most important part that I feel, which probably many organizations are not focusing now, is offloading. Now, what happens when an employee quits the organization? Now, that's the time probably I genuinely believe the organization need to step up and give an experience for an individual. The effort we put in at the time of hiring or onboarding, the same experience an individual should have at the time of offloading also. Because that individual who's moving out is an ambassador for your organization, whether he's bad-mouthing or talking about good things about the organizations, right? That entirely depends upon the individual and the kind of experience that individual is getting when he's moving out of the organization. In fact, I've seen IT company, I have experienced this myself, to be very honest, right? Wherein the experience has been phenomenal. Once you serve your notice period and all those things, right? All these stuff just takes care within a couple of hours, because everything happens on a system, on a mobile app over there. Right? It just happens within 3 hours, all your settlement done, everything done. Post that, immediately you get an alumni mail as well to connect them to be in their network, and they will ensure that you are in touch with them regularly. So that's the beauty of, if you look at it, an employee, even if he or she quits 3 years, 4 years, 5 years after the organization, but is still connected with the organization and can correlate what all stuff happening over there, and still continues to be a brand ambassador in terms of sourcing more talent for the organization.
Fantastic, fantastic. Thank you, Atul and Aditya, on those. One, example comes to my mind when we talk about technology and how future trends are helping. And I saw a video before coming to this session where it was similar panel like this, I mean, a couple of years ago. And one of the panelists was giving this example where an employee is sick that day and he just picks up the phone and tells the AI assistant, hey, I'm sick today, I can't go to office, right? Now the AI assistant is able to immediately submit a sick leave request through their HR system, get the approval, but not only that, it will go and look at the calendar of this person and see all the meetings which they are supposed to attend that day and sends out a respectful email of cancellation or rescheduling. Imagine that, right? And then you continuously think about what else can technology help you do. That's what reminded me of the future trends in innovation. So thank you for both of your inputs. Let's move on to question number 4, which given the rapid pace of technology, right? There's a lot of advancement. How do we ensure, as HR leaders, employees continuously upskill and reskill to effectively leverage these technologies and at the same time navigate the complexities of integrating those tools into your existing HR systems?
That's a tough one. Sorry. I think gone are the days where you will really have to kind of send somebody into a room to upskill. You have to upskill in the moment. So if it's a task, if it's there's this guy called Josh Bersin. He writes a lot in terms of technology. He started using, a couple of years back, a term which was called in the flow of work. And I think upskilling has to be in the flow of work. Do you want somebody to teach you how to make biryani, or do you want to kind of, when you're in the kitchen, it tells you step 1, step 2, step 3. And by the time you've made the biryani, you're already kind of, you know how to do it. You've practiced it out. I think a lot of it is going to be about the flow of work. How do you make it simple? How do you make it bite-sized? And when you need it. So contextual learning becomes very, very key. So I think that's one big one. The second big one is, and we've seen this, the tail of learning is very, very long. Right? You have early adopters, but a lot of people who do not. And I don't have an answer, but how do you get the vast majority of the organization curious enough to learn? You can take a horse to the water, but you can't make it drink it, right? So as an organization, you can probably put the pool of water there. You can kind of coax the horse to go try some water. But that real curiosity and mindset is the horses, right? So I think that's going to be a pretty large challenge for organizations to do. How do you kind of drive that curiosity in the employee to be willing to learn?
Great. So I remember the days when I started my career almost 2 decades ago, and my manager, a very smart guy at that point in time, and daily evening he used to call me, okay Atul, aaj kya sikha? I'm like, okay, I did this, the next day again. And he continued this thing for next few days. And one fine day I was like, what do you think? Every day I'm going to learn something new. It's the same stuff. And his response was that the day you stop learning anything new, your growth is stalled. So you just started your career, ensure that every day you're going to learn something. So like Aditya said, right, it has to come within. And that's absolutely, that's apt. But you have to look at it, right? You need to be in constant touch with the business. Business is changing almost every day now. So as an HR professional, it's very important for an individual to stay in touch with the business, to get a pulse as to what new requirements are going to come or how the business is going to shape it up. And accordingly, you have to push your employees in terms of reskilling or upskilling at the same time. Right? So it is important because when you provide the right technology or tools to the employees, in HR profession, as an HR professional, it's very important for you to understand, to have that knowledge of the tool so that employees also start adapting to it. Right? And like Aditya said, I mean, you can get the horse to the water, but you cannot make them swim. So you can keep pushing technology all to them. But eventually, yes, I agree with him, it has to come within. But that's something, it has to happen on a continuous basis, on a regular basis.
Thank you, thank you. And that reminds me that few of our customers, and I'm sure you do the same in your organization too, is how do you incentivize your employees to learn more, right? And learn more in the job and kind of stay on the cutting edge. I think you were sharing an example on incentives. Would you want to elaborate on that?
So I think, and again, this is shamelessly been copied, so apologies in advance. I read an article just this morning which talked about incentives. Great Britain used to send the thugs, thieves, unwanted people to Australia in 1700s. And as they used to send people, the captains of the ship, which used to carry these people, were given an incentive based on the number of people who climbed into the ship. And they realized this arduous journey led to almost 33% of the people dying. It was a big, long trip around the world, right? Till some bureaucrat out there decided that they're wrongly incentivizing the captain on number of people who walk into the ship. They started incentivizing them on the number of people who walked out of the ship. And from 33% deaths in this journey, it dropped to 1%. So the power of incentive is huge. And I think as we are thinking about skilling, you have to create not only the environment, but also the right incentives for them to be willing and wanting to try this out.
Awesome. Thank you so much. That's very fascinating story, and I'll remember that for a long time. So my final question to both of you, right? So in harnessing data, data is everywhere nowadays, right? So harnessing data with HR insights, what ethical considerations should organizations like you keep in mind, right, to ensure that employee privacy and trust, right, are upheld while still extracting the valuable insights to inform those strategic decision making?
That's a perfect question to a CHRO.
I think this has not been mastered. There are standards of security that the organization needs to maintain. It's going to get tougher as new data protection norms come into play. I think the organization needs to get very, very sensitive and categorize information that is of sensitive nature and make sure the guardrails are in place. It gets more difficult with open source platforms. So for example, just a word of caution, don't put things that you want to be private on ChatGPT. ChatGPT can spew it out to somebody else without you realizing that. And actually that has been one of those areas that has slowed the pace of innovative change in HR also. Because companies are cautious, and rightly so. Should the medical data be shared with a larger public? Maybe not. Are you comfortable with sharing your driving data to the insurance provider? Insurance provider can tell you that he can either increase or decrease. So that sensitivity has to be maintained, and that has to be core as you start exploring technology. And those guardrails need to be very clearly laid out even before you start the journey.
So I think if you look at it, probably in India, we were and we are slightly insensitive when it comes to data privacy, right? If you look at the non-India geographies, over there data privacy is of prime importance, right? But having said that, nonetheless, we are catching up fast. What we need to ensure is that while data privacy and safety is definitely not compromised, we are gathering some confidential information from an employee. So it's very important, one, to be transparent, to let the employee know what information we are collecting from them and how are we going to use it. That's one. Two is that any analysis that an organization is making out of that, right, we are not discriminating employees, be it in terms of performance or be in terms of the caste, color, whatever it is. So that's something need to be done. Having said that, if we look at it in last 5 years, or not last 5 years, rather last 8 years, the trajectory as far as the data privacy concerns in India is concerned, right? It has picked up. You look at it, we go to the shopping malls and all those things. Over there, we'll find some shopkeepers asking for mobile numbers, collecting our date of birth and all those things, and we just give it to them, right? Assuming that we are going to get some free gift out of it. But no, that's not the case. They in turn are selling the data to, and that's why we get these phone calls and all those things. So that's a classic example. But as an organization, I guess, we are becoming far more sensitive now. At least in last couple of years, things have changed. And that's again, during the COVID era, we realized the importance of data privacy because things become virtual and all those things, and we started interacting with the people, not in the in-person mode. And that's how the Indian organizations also have started becoming far more sensitive. But nonetheless, we still have a long journey to go.
Maybe I'll add 2 more points out here. So Atul's kind of added quite a bit. There is not a universal understanding of what is private and what is not. Right? What is private in India may not be private outside, and what is private outside may not be private in India. So that's one concern. So there's no universality out there. I think the second is we run a risk where we get machines to learn our own biases. And that's a reality, right? So if a machine learns how we hire, and we hire in a biased manner, and if that's the case, then you run a situation where a machine would prolong the bias, even deepen it. So that's definitely a big area of concern as new technology comes in. All right, I think we're being given hints.
I think so too, but thank you, Aditya. Thank you, Atul. Fantastic.